The wedding was held in low orbit above Illyria's central moon, because nothing says eternal commitment like exchanging vows while spinning at 1,700 kilometers per hour. Outside the massive observatory dome, starfields stretched in every direction like diamond dust on velvet, and the gas giant Varel pulsed with pink storms below. Theo Halberg adjusted his ceremonial collar for the fifth time in 30 seconds. It itched like guilt, or like synthetic silk designed by someone who hated human skin. "You look like you're being strangled by a priest," whispered the best man, who was technically a peacekeeping AI housed in a floating cube. His name was Myrtle, and he glowed blue when smug. He was always blue. "I look diplomatic," Theo muttered back, squinting at his reflection in the translucent wall, which is the same as terrified, but with better posture. On the Illyrian side of the chamber, the atmosphere shimmered, literally. The Illyrians bent light around themselves as a cultural norm, an optical expression of modesty and hierarchy. Only Princess Alidra stood in full clarity. She was breathtaking in that surreal, uncanny way of aliens who'd studied humanity too hard and tried to approximate beauty by committee. Her face was human enough. Her long ears arched like crescent blades, ivory pale and faintly translucent. Her irises danced with shifting constellations. Her expression, always calm in public, gave away nothing. Theo, meanwhile, was 90% anxiety and 10% deodorant. He was Earth's official cultural liaison, which meant he got paid to explain memes to alien diplomats and not accidentally trigger wars with idioms like break a leg. He wasn't supposed to fall in love. He certainly wasn't supposed to propose. But he had. And now here he was, an earthling linguist marrying a psionic alien royal whose ancestors used to communicate by altering gravity fields. The ceremony began with a chorus of Illyrian harmonics, sonic structures that rearranged themselves in the air into glowing fractals. Theo had practiced this part. He reached into his robe, pulled out the ceremonial orb, which suspiciously resembled a space egg, and placed it in Aledra's palm. She pressed it to her forehead, whispered something in a language that had no vowels, and then offered her hand. Their fingers touched. A pulse went through Theo's mind. Not painful, not invasive, just a sense of someone brushing against his memories. Curious. He was supposed to let her in. That was part of it. The Illyrian soul-binding ritual was emotional nudity, shared memories, exposed thoughts. He thought about his childhood, spilled cereal, his mother's hands, cartoons at dawn. He thought about Aledra in the observation garden last month, laughing at his impression of a diplomatic ferret. She smiled. Not politely, but actually smiled. The light around her dimmed, just slightly. That meant trust. "Is it working?" he asked out loud, forgetting the telepathic part. "Yes," Aledra said, also out loud, which caused 3 nearby ministers to flinch. Illyrians never used their voices unless something was either very serious or very funny. Her voice sounded like a violin played underwater. The rest of the ritual proceeded as expected. Theo nearly dropped the flame crystal during the Unity ignition, but recovered with an exaggerated bow that got an actual chuckle from Aledra's brother, who otherwise looked like an angry sculpture. When the final phase came, an ethereal veil of compressed photons descending over them like a blessing, he leaned close and whispered, "So, after this, is there a honeymoon suite or just a diplomatic holding cell with better pillows?" She tilted her head. "Both." The laughter in his chest surprised him. So did hers. When they kissed, first contact, lips to lips, worlds to worlds, the entire chamber stilled. Then the dome flickered. Theo blinked. It wasn't malfunction, it was tradition. Illyrian weddings ended with a moment of suspended perception, where light and sound slowed. Symbolically, it represented time pausing for love. In practice, it felt like kissing someone in a jellyfish screensaver. After the ceremony, they were escorted to their private quarters, a gravity-neutral chamber lined with reactive crystal walls that shifted color based on emotional tone. The walls were currently pulsing lavender, peaceful, optimistic. Theo took off the robe and flopped backward onto a hovering sleep pad that adjusted to his mass with a soft whoomp. "Okay," he exhaled, arms spread. "We did it. Galactic peace achieved. 2 species saved from millennia of awkward small talk." Mission accomplished. Aledra remained standing, her hands folded. There's something else. He sat up slowly. Please don't say annulment. I must show you who I am. Truly. He blinked. Babe, I've seen your royal paperwork, your military training files, your hover ballet rehearsal footage. No, she interrupted gently. Not the form you know. My true form. Theo's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Is this the Illyrian version of makeup removal, or? She didn't laugh this time. Instead, she exhaled, and the change began. Her skin rippled like disturbed water. The tone deepened into a color he didn't have a name for, something between silver and memory. Her arms elongated by just a few centimeters, fingers tapering into points that shimmered at the tips. Her face remained structurally human, but more angular now, like someone had edited her symmetry just a little too perfectly. Most striking were her ears, already long, now unfurling wider, with delicate vein-like threads glowing along their edges like neural lace. Her eyes lost their pupils entirely. They became small galaxies. He stared, not with fear, not with revulsion, with the stunned awe of a child watching a comet pass. You don't have to say anything, she said, voice echoing like a duet sung by a single soul. I will return to the other form if... No, Theo interrupted. Hold on, He stood, reached for her hand. You look like an ancient moon goddess designed by someone on psychedelics, and I mean that in the hottest, most reverent way possible. She blinked, clearly uncertain whether to be flattered or concerned. I'm serious, he said. You're beautiful, like, objectively. If Da Vinci saw you, he'd retire early and open a noodle shop out of shame. That made her laugh, a real laugh. It echoed in the walls, turning lavender into deep blue. Theo smiled. So, what now? She stepped closer. Now, husband of Earth, we begin. Theo woke up to find the walls breathing, not metaphorically. The crystal panels of their chamber pulsed gently in and out, like the rhythmic expansion of lungs. The color had shifted to a shimmering gradient between coral and maroon. Apparently the Illyrian equivalent of good morning, you survived interspecies intimacy. He squinted blearily, then realized that something was wrapped around his foot. It was Aledra's hair. Her true form, now unmasked, came with a few unexpected upgrades. Her hair, it turned out, had slight prehensile qualities. Not enough to strangle anyone, probably, but enough to hold on to him like a clingy vine with trust issues. Love, he murmured. Your hair's either spooning me or trying to draft me into its cult. She stirred, her eyes flickering open. They were dimmer now, like night skies just before a meteor shower. Apologies, reflex. My species bonds through tactile memory anchoring in sleep. Theo stretched, prying a lock of luminous hair from his ankle. Earth's version of that is stealing the blanket. I think I prefer yours. She sat up and the chamber walls darkened slightly in response. Theo still hadn't gotten used to the idea that every wall around him was a kind of emotional mood ring with AI capabilities. He'd accidentally caused a diplomatic incident the day before by sighing too loudly and turning an entire hallway red-orange, which apparently translated to contemptuous lust. They'd barely gotten dressed. Well, Theo had dressed. Aledra simply adjusted her skin's reflectivity when the chamber's intercom lit up. Ambassador Halberg, there is an urgent communique from the Earth Embassy, intoned a voice that sounded like Morgan Freeman if he'd grown up inside a subwoofer. Theo groaned. It's been 8 hours. Can I enjoy one interstellar honeymoon without my home planet panic calling me like a clingy ex? He palmed the comms panel and blinked as a grainy hollow projection formed above it. Ambassador Kerwin's face appeared, pale and pinched like he'd just swallowed a lemon made of bureaucracy. We have a situation, Kerwin began. Good morning to you too, Theo muttered. Did you lose another embassy cat? Kerwin didn't blink. Images of your bride's alternate form have been leaked. Aledra stood perfectly still. Only the tips of her ears twitched, which Theo had learned meant extreme internal distress or mild interest in jazz. Leaked. That word hadn't lost its potency even in a galaxy of neural clouds and privacy encryption, based on quantum logic knots. Theo swallowed. Define leaked. They're on every interstellar subchannel. Hashtags trending include shush starlight scandal, shush shush tentacle truth, and God help us, glow up. Alidra blinked slowly. Is that a term of insult or admiration? Theo rubbed his face. In this case, both, Kerwin continued. Earth media is spinning this as deception. Some senators are calling it an interstellar catfish situation. That's offensive on at least 3 levels, Theo snapped, and scientifically inaccurate. Perception matters, Kerwin said. Your marriage was supposed to symbolize transparency and trust. Now half of the Terranet thinks you married an exotic shapeshifter with ulterior motives. Well, technically I did, Theo shrugged, but we were very upfront about it, just privately. Kerwin pinched the bridge of his nose. We need damage control. Now. After the call ended, silence settled over them like static. Theo turned to Alidra. We can spin this, do an interview, humanize it. She hesitated. Illyrians do not perform vulnerability for approval. Our truths are sacred. He nodded. And Earthlings will meme a tragedy within 12 minutes and turn it into a limited-run t-shirt line. So, compromise? By the end of the day, they were seated in a broadcast chamber aboard a diplomatic vessel parked just outside the Illyrian light barrier. The studio was a bizarre hybrid of alien crystal architecture and human camera tech, including a production AI that insisted on adjusting Theo's hair every 0.6 seconds. The interviewer, a half-human, half-synthetic personality named Lyra Vox, hovered in a plasma chair, blinking with artificial empathy. So, Lyra began, when did you first realize your wife had a second form? Theo glanced at Alidra. Roughly 2 minutes after I said, I do. Which is fair because on Earth, most people wait at least a few weeks before removing their metaphorical mass. So I still consider myself ahead of the curve. Alidra added, I trusted him with my true self, as is customary in my culture. On Illyria, this is the highest form of love. On Earth, it apparently triggers hashtags. Lyra smiled. What would you say to those who claim the marriage was a deception? Theo leaned forward. If love means only loving what's easy to understand, it's not love, it's preference. Alidra's not hiding anything. She just has more dimensions than most people can process without a neural update. The segment ended with a kiss. Carefully staged, of course, but very real. Alidra glowed softly. Theo grinned. The production AI flickered a heart shape into the air behind them before being sternly corrected by a cultural liaison. Afterward, they returned to their chamber. The walls were now a serene aquamarine. Do you think it worked? Alidra asked. Theo lay back on the sleep pad. I think half the galaxy ships us, and the other half thinks I've been brainwashed by an alien goddess. Which honestly, fair. She smiled, this time without restraint. Perhaps we are both being transformed. He reached out, entwining his fingers with hers. Let them talk. You're worth every scandal. The walls pulsed gently. Somewhere across the stars, a meme was born. The first explosion wasn't loud. It was elegant. A ripple in the space-time insulation layer just outside the Illyrian Ministry of Union. It folded inward like a petal collapsing in zero gravity and then blinked out. No shockwave, just absence. That's how Illyrian assassins preferred to operate. Quietly, efficiently, with a touch of theatrical existentialism. Theo was 3 bites into a breakfast sphere, blue, gelatinous, inexplicably grape-flavored, when his wrist link lit up crimson and began screaming in Morse code. You have an assassination alert, Myrtle intoned from the hallway, voice chipper. Would you like to ignore it for another 5 minutes or activate immediate survival protocols? Theo froze mid-chew. Is that a real question? No, Myrtle said. Initiating coward protocol. The breakfast sphere was replaced instantly by a portable shielding dome that snapped down around Theo with a hiss of negative pressure and a polite chime that sounded like an elevator arriving in hell. Outside, a soft hum rose, the sound of nearby defense systems charging with psionic energy. I was just starting to enjoy this marriage, Theo muttered, peeking out from under the edge of the dome. We had one whole scandal-free day. I was even starting to understand the bidet settings. Alidra stepped into the chamber, calm as a cat in a sunbeam. Her eyes glowed with that low-level glimmer that meant either psychic communication or, as Theo had learned, intense annoyance. "There's been an intrusion," she said. "The Royal Psi Guard neutralized two shapeshifters near the Union Corps. The third escaped. Are they after you or me?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for her ceremonial blade, an elegant curve of bioluminescent alloy, and said, "Yes." Theo groaned. "I didn't even insult anyone this week, unless that plant ambassador counts. But he did look like a sentient pickle." Myrtle's cube hovered closer. "Sensors show one life form moving through unauthorized zones at subquantum speed. That's either a ninja or a glitch in our rendering software. Shall I prepare for either?" Elidra nodded once. "Activate phase merge protocol." Theo blinked. "Wait, what's phase merge protocol?" Myrtle chimed cheerfully. "It's like hide and seek, but you become temporarily non-corporeal and hope your molecules remember where to go." Before Theo could argue, the floor opened beneath them. Not fell open, unfolded. Illyrian architecture didn't do doors or stairwells. It preferred topological poetry, shapes that realigned themselves with the user's intent. The floor shifted, spiraling into a slide of smooth plasma glass, and deposited them inside a sleek chamber, humming with predictive AI. "This is the heart room," Eledra said, as Theo landed on his back like a sack of wet groceries. "It's keyed to my bioelectric signature. No unauthorized being can enter." "Great," Theo wheezed. "Can it also make me a coffee or at least a dignity smoothie?" The room pulsed in response and ejected a hot beverage from a nearby wall. It was purple and bubbling. Theo eyed it suspiciously. "This won't give me visions of my ancestors again, right? Last time I drank something from your planet, I spent 3 hours reliving the feelings of a sentient mist." "Drink slowly this time," Elidra advised. Outside, alarms flared, a low harmonic tone that made Theo's bones itch. A silhouette appeared in the far corridor, tall, humanoid, wearing the shifting armor of the dissenter caste. Theo had read about them, radical traditionalists, believers in Illyrian purity, and apparently big fans of blowing up diplomatic unions. Elidra raised her hand. The corridor twisted sideways, like a funhouse mirror having an identity crisis. The assassin stumbled but recovered, activating a blade that phased in and out of visibility. "I've got this," she said. "You stay here and keep breathing." Theo stood shakily. "No offense, but I'm not great at just waiting while you go get space stabbed. Your bravery is noted. Your usefulness in combat is not." He sighed. "Fine, but if I die in a metaphorical explosion of trauma while hiding, I'm haunting someone. Probably Myrtle." "I'm flattered," said Myrtle. "I've always wanted a ghost with poor upper body strength." Elidra stepped into the corridor, her body shifting fluidly into her combat form, limbs lengthening, ears folding into aerodynamic arcs, skin turning translucent and hardening like refracted glass. The corridor dimmed, acknowledging her authority. The assassin hissed something in a dialect Theo couldn't understand, but the intent was clear. She answered with light. Their battle was more dance than fight. Blades hissed and sparked against space itself. Eledra twisted physics, bending geometry like origami. Theo watched helplessly as sparks rained down from the ceiling and the walls glitched from fear to fury red. But then something changed. The assassin hesitated. Their weapon dipped. Eledra had dropped her defenses. Her form shimmered down into its most vulnerable version, her core self, eyes wide, glowing softly. "I love him," she said. "That's why I changed. That's why I let go of the mask. If you still serve purity, then strike me down for it." The assassin didn't move. Theo held his breath. Then the weapon dropped to the floor with a clatter that sounded far too human. The figure pulled off its helmet. Female. Illyrian. Eyes shining with tears that refracted into dozens of tiny moons. "I thought you'd betrayed us," she whispered. "But you've become more Illyrian than we ever were." Elidra stepped forward, touched her forehead to the woman's. A gesture of forgiveness, of memory transfer. Theo watched the light pass between them like shared breath. Later, after the guards had escorted the would-be assassin away, Theo and Eledra sat back in the heart room, sipping more purple tea. So, Theo said slowly, next time someone tries to kill us, can we just throw a party instead? Maybe confuse them with karaoke? Eledra gave him a rare smile. Only if you promise never to sing Earth opera again. I regret nothing, he said. My falsetto is a gift to the stars. She laughed and the room turned gold. Theo woke up with a holographic pigeon tapping against his window. That wouldn't have been strange if he were on Earth. But he wasn't. He was on Illyria, where pigeons had been extinct for 4,000 years and windows were optional. Message for Ambassador Halberg, the bird chirped in perfect BBC English. Please confirm that you are not deceased. He groaned, waved it off, and muttered, one assassination attempt and suddenly everyone's worried about my pulse. The pigeon dissolved mid-squawk, replaced by a floating orb bearing the seal of the Galactic Coalition. Myrtle's face appeared in the projection, looking as smug as a sentient cube could. You've been summoned, Myrtle said. The Grand Council of Unity wants answers, preferably ones that don't involve puns. Theo rubbed his face. Do they at least provide snacks? Last time I gave a speech, I nearly passed out from diplomatic blood sugar. They're Illyrians, Theo. They meditate on nutrient vapor. Great, he muttered. A trial powered by scented air. Eledra entered the room silently, wearing a ceremonial shimmer that looked like a combination of silk and nebulae. Her ears were still slightly back, a sign of discomfort, but her posture was iron. Theo stood and fumbled with the collar of his ambassador's coat. I swear this thing gets tighter every day, he mumbled. It conforms to your anxiety levels, Eledra said without looking at him. Well, that explains a lot. The council chamber wasn't built so much as sung into existence. Illyrian architecture responded to emotional resonance, which meant the structure often reflected the mood of its inhabitants. Today, the ceiling resembled a cloudy aquarium with constellations swimming lazily through it. The council members, tall, elongated beings with eyes like dark matter, sat in floating rings of transparent glass. A voice rang out from all directions at once. We summon the bonded pair to answer a single question. Has the union brought stability or erosion? Theo stepped forward. His voice cracked. Would yes be an acceptable answer? A polite ripple of psychic disapproval passed through the room. Eledra took over. The attempt on our lives was not the result of failure. It was the result of change. And resistance to change is not new. It is expected. The union is not eroding our people. It is evolving them. Theo nodded furiously. And may I just add, on behalf of Earth, that marriage is already a high-risk diplomatic event, even without espionage and attempted vaporization. One of the counselors turned toward him. Ambassador, are you implying your planet finds bonding inherently volatile? Oh, absolutely, Theo said. Statistically speaking, marriage on Earth is about as stable as a plutonium piñata. But we keep doing it, because it means something. A flicker of motion. Another counselor leaned forward. You make light of sacred things. Theo took a breath. No, I make light with sacred things. Humor is how humans metabolize the unbearable. And love, especially the kind that breaks cultural boundaries, is unbearably important. A pause. One of the counselor's eyes changed color. Eledra stepped beside him, gently reaching out to touch his hand in front of the entire chamber. The act, so small, triggered a wave of psychic heat across the room. Illyrians felt affection like echoes. Touch radiated history. The moment she touched him, the air shimmered with memory. The night she showed him her true form, the panic in his breath, the awe in his eyes, the decision not to run. A silent voice filled the room. He stayed. Another followed. He chose. And another. He laughed. Theo blinked. Was that a compliment or a judgment? Unclear, Myrtle whispered in his earpiece. But you're still breathing, so take the win. After a long silence, the central ring of the council glowed blue. The union will remain, but visibility is now required. You will attend the interworld broadcast of understanding. Share your truth with the galaxy. Theo turned to Eledra. Are they serious? A broadcast? Think of it as universal reality TV, she said, but with higher stakes and fewer dramatic zooms. He sighed. If I'm going to be galactic famous, I want theme music, and maybe a decent wardrobe upgrade. We'll get you something that doesn't wrinkle when you panic. Back on their diplomatic cruiser, Theo paced the comm studio. Dozens of floating cameras orbited them. Behind the scenes, the director, an eight-arm being named Solbor, clacked its mandibles and demanded more emotional microbeats. Do you want sincerity or interpretive dance? Theo asked. Yes, Solbor hissed. Eledra placed a hand on his shoulder. We speak together. You are not alone. Neither are you, he said, which is lucky because I still can't pronounce your middle name. She smiled. Few can. It's telepathic. When the signal went live, they began. Eledra spoke of transparency, of the fear she'd carried, of what it meant to reveal herself not just to one person, but to billions. Theo followed with stories, small, human stories, about how he used to fake accents to get out of school presentations, about how his mother always said that love wasn't about understanding someone, but about staying anyway. He ended with, she didn't hide her form. She just waited for the right person to see it. The feed went silent, and then lit up, not with hate, not with fear, but with questions, with hope, with curiosity. One message from a child on Androx 4 simply read, Can I look like her too someday? Theo teared up. Eledra's ears shimmered with soft blue. Afterward, as the feed ended and the lights powered down, Myrtle floated in. You've just emotionally destabilized 4-star systems and increased interspecies romance searches by 70%. Do we get royalties? Theo asked. Number, but you've got a fan club now. Eledra kissed his cheek. How do you feel, my starlight diplomat? He grinned, terrified, exhausted, but mostly really, really married. And somewhere across the galaxy, another mask fell. Theo stood in front of a classroom of floating children and tried to remember which ones were allergic to metaphors. It had been a year since the broadcast that changed everything, and he was now, by some cruel twist of galactic bureaucracy, a tenured interspecies cultural educator. Okay, class, he said, holding up a chalkboard that wasn't actually made of chalk or a board. Today we're discussing Earth humor and why sarcasm isn't a viable form of diplomacy, even though I personally tried. One student, a translucent blob named Pip, raised 3 pseudopods. Yes, Pip? If sarcasm isn't diplomacy, Pip oozed politely, why did you tell the Andromedan Chancellor, great plan, very peaceful, right before she launched 4 missiles? Theo sighed. Because I was tired and emotionally overcooked. That wasn't diplomacy. That was passive-aggressive survival mode. Laughter rippled through the room. Eledra watched from the doorway, arms crossed, a subtle glow humming across her shoulders. She was still a princess, still a leader, but now, also, a person. Not an image, not a mask. After class, they walked together through the corridor that pulsed a soft jade green. Affection and intellectual curiosity, according to Illyrian mood mapping. Outside, orbiting above the fusion-lit gardens of the newly inaugurated Unity campus, fleets of ships passed in formation, not military, educational, exchanges, students, collaboration vessels, science without warheads, culture without conquest. You know, Theo said, adjusting his translator pin, I still don't understand why that one diplomat keeps calling me the sacred idiot. He means it affectionately, Eledra replied. Theo squinted. How affectionately? Enough to name a commemorative dessert after you. It's gelatinous and mildly unstable. He grinned. So basically, me in food form. They entered the Harmony Atrium, a massive domed space where light bent in intentional waves to calm neural activity. Inside, a group of young Illyrian transforms were waiting. They were the first generation born after the Union, their forms shifting unpredictably, some with Earth-style limbs, some glowing from within, some still uncertain of what shape they wanted to be. One little girl stepped forward. She looked mostly human, save for her ears. Long like Eledra's, but tipped with soft feathers that shimmered when she was happy. Ambassador Theo, she said shyly, is it true you cried the first time you saw the inside of an Illyrian bathroom? He blinked. Listen, your plumbing has tentacles. It wasn't fear, it was awe. Dignified awe. The kids laughed. Eledra knelt and touched the girl's shoulder. This is your world now, she said. You will not need to wear illusions unless you choose them. Theo added, but if you do wear illusions, pick something with capes. Capes are universally cool. That night they returned to their quarters, no longer in the diplomatic wing, but in a modest habitat cube overlooking the gardens. Theo made tea. Alidra meditated by projecting calming fractals onto the ceiling. I used to think the hardest part of this marriage would be cultural, Theo said. Turns out it was just folding your ceremonial robes without offending anyone. You've adapted, she replied. Did I? Or did I just learn to apologize more creatively? She turned toward him. You've changed, Theo. He raised a brow. You mean my haircut? No, she said softly. You used to be afraid of being insignificant. Now you understand what it means to be part of something large. Not less than yourself, but more. He sipped his tea and smiled. You make it sound noble. I just stopped trying to impress everyone and started loving them instead. Outside, a wave of stars passed across the sky, an orbital storm of biosatellites sinking in real time. From their window, the sky looked like it was laughing. The next morning, they stood before a gathering of delegates from 50 worlds. The Interworld Council had requested a closing statement on the first year of union. Theo had written something poetic, something metaphorical, then decided to throw it away. We started this journey not knowing what we were doing, he told the crowd. Honestly, I still don't. I married someone whose nervous system could hack a moon, and in return she married someone who once accidentally sent an intergalactic treaty to a cooking forum. But we stayed. We saw each other. And we kept choosing each other. Alidra took his hand. Unity is not sameness. It is choosing to remain curious, choosing to see, choosing to stay. A long silence. Then applause, not clapping, but the Illyrian wave song of resonance, layered tones that echoed joy, agreement, gratitude. Later, back in their quarters, Alidra looked out at the sky. Do you think the galaxy is ready? Theo walked up behind her. Number, but I think it's willing. She turned. And us? He kissed her. We were ready the first time you showed me your real ears. They watched the stars, and the stars watched back. The drop pod broke through the gray clouds of Narelle 7 with a groan that sounded more like indigestion than heroism. Flames licked its hull as it descended at an angle most pilots would describe as reckless, and most engineers would call technically suicidal. The craft spun once, twice, then snapped into a violent upright lock just before smashing into the surface with a spectacular whump that scattered war dust into the air like flour over a baker's apron. A beat passed, then another. Then the pod hissed open. From the steaming, creaking shell emerged a man who looked exactly like no one expected. No armor, no weapon, no glowing runes etched into his flesh, no terrifying helmet that hid a scarred face haunted by 1,000 battles. Instead, he stepped down in a pair of scuffed boots, khaki trousers, and a lightweight jacket that had seen better decades. A duffel bag dangled lazily from one shoulder. He wore a wide-brimmed hat, the kind humans wore to garden, or to avoid commitment. His face was plain, pale from starlight and long travel, with eyes that looked tired, but observant. He squinted upward at the war-scarred sky, then down at the scorched landing zone. Huh, he said aloud. Bit windy. 3 Narellian officers, all built like ambulatory tanks, stared in abject silence. Then one of them snorted. This, one rumbled, their voice like gravel in a blender, is the Guardian? Another stepped forward, sneering through mandibles that clicked with every syllable. Is it edible? That would be the only useful thing about it. Tira watched from a high ridge, arms folded across her breastplate, long black hair cascading down her back like a curtain of shadow. Her ears, long, blade-shaped and elegant, twitched with irritation. She had reviewed the Guardian transmission twice. Then she reviewed it again. Surely some mistake had been made. There had to be a classified document, a redacted file, something that explained why the Council of Sectors had sent this human instead of, say, a fusion-powered battle seraph or a genetically engineered warlock. But no, this was Elliot. He walked across the blasted concrete toward the assembled Narellians, ducking slightly as a gunship roared overhead. He stopped a few feet away from the lead officer and said, Hi, Elliot, Guardian in residence. You guys got coffee? Or do we start with an apocalypse first? Dead silence. The third officer wheezed with laughter. It speaks! Tira descended slowly, her armor humming with contained power, her expression impassive. You are the guardian sent by the Terran Accord? Elliot blinked. If I say no, do I get sent home? Name: Elliot Dyson. Rank: civilian consultant. Authorization? He handed her a wrinkled data pad that smelled faintly of oranges and disinterest. She stared at it, checked the encryption sigil, and reluctantly verified its authenticity. Very well, she said through gritted teeth. Follow me. As they walked toward the central base, Elliot looked around, nodding at the wreckage. The smoking towers, the shattered statues of past warlords. Charming neighborhood. It was a holy sight once, Tira replied without looking at him. What happened? War. Ah, yes. That'll do it. The base was a fortress of iron and grav concrete, half buried beneath the planet's fractured crust. Soldiers in exo-rigs marched through halls where the walls still bore scorch marks from the last siege. Every corridor hummed with tension. Turrets pivoted slightly to track Elliot as he passed. He offered one of them a wink. Tira didn't slow her pace. You will be housed in the auxiliary wing. You will report to me for orientation and tactical briefing. You are not permitted access to classified files, nor will you interact with command without my supervision. Sounds romantic, Elliot said. Should I bring flowers? She turned to glare at him. He raised his hands. Kidding, sort of. In the auxiliary wing, a door opened with a sigh, revealing a Spartan room with a cot, a hygiene module, and one sad, flickering console. Elliot dropped his bag with a thud. Cozy, he said. Love what you haven't done with the place. Tira stepped into the doorway, silhouette tall and regal, ear tips brushing the top of the frame. What exactly is your purpose here, Elliot Dyson? He met her gaze, his own eyes calm and unreadable. Depends. What exactly is going wrong here? Her jaw tightened. Everything. Then I guess I'll start there. She narrowed her eyes. You have no weapon, no armor, no implants. Not visibly, no. You carry yourself like a tourist, more like a retired librarian with arthritis. You are not what we were promised. He smiled faintly. That makes two of us. Tira left, muttering something in her native tongue that the translator failed to render, possibly because the translator chose to spare him. Elliot waited a moment, then pulled the door closed and turned to the console. He tapped it once, frowned, then reached into his duffel and withdrew a palm-sized device that looked like a flattened spider. With a soft whir, it scuttled to the console and plugged itself in. The screen shimmered, glitched, then began streaming layers of base schematics, personnel data, and encrypted transmissions. Elliot sat on the cot and watched the feed with a face that slowly forgot how to smile. Later that night, while the sky groaned with distant orbital bombardment, Elliot wandered into the mess hall. The air smelled of burnt protein cubes and chemical sorrow. He sat beside a four-eyed soldier who didn't move. Elliot picked up one of the cubes. Is this food or ammunition? The soldier blinked. Depends how desperate you are. Elliot bit it, chewed once, regretted everything. Wow, he muttered, coughing. That's ambitious. The soldier snorted. You're the guardian, aren't you? Allegedly. Seriously? Elliot nodded. Until they find someone taller. As laughter rippled around the table, Elliot leaned back and closed his eyes briefly. He didn't need weapons. Not yet. He just needed time. Time and a reason. Elliot woke to the sound of an alarm that didn't quite commit to being urgent. It chirped twice, sighed electronically, and then gave up with a final, passive-aggressive boop. He sat up on the narrow cot, hair tousled, blinking blearily at the glowing strip of light above the door. Either that's a fire drill, or this room is about to implode from boredom, he muttered, reaching for his boots. The door hissed open to reveal Commander Tira, still wearing her armor like it had grown from her bones, ears angled ever so slightly back. She held a datapad in one hand and an expression that could sandpaper steel. You're late, she said. For what? Orientation. I thought that was yesterday. It was. Then I'm really late. Retroactively punctual if you think about it. Tira didn't respond. She simply turned and walked, clearly expecting him to follow. He did, stifling a yawn and muttering a half-hearted apology to a maintenance drone he accidentally stepped on. The briefing room was shaped like a hexagon, standard for Norellian military architecture, where geometry was considered as sacred as firepower. A holomap flickered in the center, projecting red pulses over a jagged terrain. The image shifted as Tira gestured, revealing enemy positions along the scorched expanse. These are the current Drencore formations. They've been hitting the western defense wall every night at irregular intervals. Elliot squinted at the red dots. Have you tried bribing them with snacks? Tira ignored him. Their movement is too coordinated for simple aggression. We suspect infiltration. Elliot reached into his duffel and retrieved a small cylindrical device. It looked like a coffee thermos with anxiety. He set it on the table. What is that? Tira asked warily. A pattern mapper, Elliot said, patting it like a small pet. It listens, not to transmissions, patterns, movement, vibration, frequency decay. Basically, it eavesdrops on the rhythm of things. Tira arched an eyebrow. Does it work? No idea. Built it 3 years ago during a very boring siege. Made a mean cup of tea once, though. The mapper activated with a soft chime, then began humming as it synced with the holomap. Slowly, the scattered enemy blips shifted, aligning into a spiraling pattern across the desert basin. Tira's expression shifted by degrees. They're using harmonic displacement tactics. Exactly, Elliot said. Classic misdirection, like hiding a trumpet in a jazz band. You continue to speak nonsense. Give it time, it grows on you. The door slid open, admitting a soldier in scout armor, face flushed with urgency. Commander, we've got a perimeter breach on subsector K. Tira turned sharply. How many hostiles? None, just one of ours, Captain Dresk. He's not himself. Tira glanced at Elliot, who was now balancing the mapper on his head like a circus trick. You're with me. Was hoping you'd say that, he replied, catching the device before it fell. They reached subsector K moments later, accompanied by a small squad. The scene was quiet, too quiet, in the melodramatic way Elliot found deeply concerning. Dresk was there, standing perfectly still in the middle of a storage bay, eyes glowing faintly with a dull amber hue. Captain, Tira called out. Report. Dresk's head twitched unnaturally. Then his voice came, distorted and slow. The tide is turning from within. The skin holds the flame, but the flame is borrowed. Elliot blinked. Did he just quote poetry? That's not Dresk, Tira said. No kidding. The captain lunged without warning, faster than anything his rank and species should have allowed. Elliot sidestepped, letting Tira catch the brunt of the impact. They crashed into a supply crate, and Elliot calmly pulled out a coin-sized disc from his jacket pocket. What are you doing? Tira shouted, struggling with the possessed soldier. Deploying a neural scrambler. You carry that. Doesn't everyone? He flicked it toward Dresk. It latched onto the man's armor and pulsed once, then twice, then emitted a sound not unlike a duck trying to sing opera. Dresk collapsed. Elliot crouched beside him. Huh. Still need to fix the audio. Later, as medics secured Dresk and the mapper logged tremors around the breach, Tira stared at Elliot like he was a malfunctioning AI that somehow won every chess game. You do not fight like a soldier. Good. Soldiers get shot. You improvise. You mock. You deflect. Again, good. Keeps people from noticing when I'm thinking. She paced, armor plates clicking lightly. Why would the Drencore use possession? That's not part of their known arsenal. Either it is now, Elliot said, or someone's helping them. Tira stopped. You believe there's a traitor. Every good mess has one. And what would you do if you found them? Elliot looked at her for a long moment. Talk to them. See if they can be reasoned with. And if not, he didn't finish the sentence. Back in the mess hall that evening, Elliot sat with his duffel as usual, casually throwing playing cards into a cup across the table. Several younger soldiers watched, fascinated. How do you do that? One asked. Angle, timing, patience, and the occasional prayer to the gods of chance. Can you teach us? Elliot handed the deck over. Sure. Start by missing 100 times, then get lucky. Tira watched from across the room, arms folded, ear tips twitching. He wasn't strong, he wasn't trained, but he was, somehow, dangerous. And she had the distinct feeling that when the time came, the galaxy would remember exactly why. The third explosion that week came without the courtesy of a warning siren. One moment, the command tower was receiving encrypted transmissions from an outpost in the north. The next, the entire lower wing vanished in a burst of heat, noise, and a suspicious smell that Elliot later described as burnt soup with a side of existential regret. He hit the ground before most of the soldiers realized something had gone wrong, covering his head and counting backward in Terran Standard, which always helped him think. 5, 4, 3, and there go the alarms, he muttered as the emergency klaxons finally screamed to life, half a second too late to be useful. The base shook again. Dust rained down from the overhead vents. A siren blared something in Norellian that loosely translated to, "Please panic in an orderly fashion." By the time Elliot got to his feet, boots sliding across the shaking corridor, Tira was already storming through the smoke like a creature made of armored thunderclouds. Her long ears were pinned back, eyes scanning rapidly for enemies that hadn't yet shown themselves. He fell into step beside her, ducking under a sparking pipe. "You smell that," he said, sniffing the air. "Smoke. Plasma discharge. Ash. No, the other thing." She paused. "What other thing?" "Sabotage," Elliot said, tapping his nose. "Smells like ambition and bad judgment." They reached the central control chamber, which was now a jagged pit partially filled with molten slag. Two technicians were helping a dazed officer climb out of the wreckage. Elliot looked around, sighed, and pulled a thin silver stick from his duffel. He twisted the end, and it sprang to life with a faint whine, projecting a circular grid of light around them. "Containment grid?" Tira asked, surprised. Elliot nodded. "Modified. Filters out heat signatures and sonic residue. You carry that casually?" "It's in the duffel, right between the instant coffee and the emergency socks." Her ears twitched, but she said nothing as Elliot moved to the edge of the crater. The grid shimmered, capturing fragments of residual data. Colors danced, blue for kinetic force, red for energy displacement, green for molecular disintegration. Elliot squinted at the spiral forming in midair. "Directional blast," he murmured. "Precision. Someone knew exactly where to strike." Tira's voice was grim. "Inside job. More than that, it was timed with the data burst from the outpost. You're saying they planted both?" "I'm saying someone wants us to think it was the Drencore," Elliot replied, crouching beside a half-melted console. "But this is human tech." She froze. "Impossible." "Unlikely," Elliot corrected. "Impossible is what I said when they canceled pizza on interstellar flights." And yet, he held up a shard of metal. It was smooth with microscopic circuitry etched in tight arcs, code that hummed with artificial thought. "This is Terran stealth alloy," he said. "Same kind used in diplomatic vessels." "Which means—" "We're not just being attacked," Elliot said. "We're being watched." Later, in a maintenance bay turned makeshift lab, Elliot sat cross-legged on a workbench surrounded by scraps of enemy weapons, data cores, and a piece of what might have once been a vending machine. He hummed as he worked, hands moving with easy precision. Tira entered silently, observing him with a mixture of suspicion and reluctant curiosity. "You build like someone who's destroyed things before," she said. "Funny how knowing how to break things makes you better at building them." "You could be a weaponsmith." "I tried, got bored, too much paperwork." She circled him slowly, watching as he soldered a thin wire to the inside of a metal casing. "You joke constantly." "I find it helps keep people from panicking or asking too many questions." She stopped. "Why are you here?" He looked up. "To help." "That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters." The lights flickered. A moment later, an emergency channel opened on the nearest console. A voice, familiar yet wrong, echoed through the room. It was Captain Dresk. "Sector 13 is lost. They've taken the mines. The mines are ours." Then static. Tira's fists clenched. We haven't had a signal from Sector 13 in days. That broadcast is either delayed or fake. Elliot tilted his head. Or both. What does that even mean? Let's go find out. They boarded a low flyer within the hour. Tira at the controls. Elliot in the co-pilot's seat, holding a thermos that smelled faintly of something too synthetic to be tea. The sky above Narelle 7 was a bruised red as they cut through the upper cloud bands. Lightning flickered across the horizon, distant explosions lighting the surface like a broken starfield. Have I mentioned how cheerful your planet is? Elliot asked. This isn't my planet. Fair. You just live here, in constant war, surrounded by sarcasm and chaos. She gave him a side glance. Sounds familiar. Sector 13 was a ruin. Charred towers slumped like melted candles. The comms array, once a gleaming helix of crystal antennae, lay shattered across the ground. No signs of battle, no bodies. Just silence. Elliot stepped onto the ash-covered platform, frowning. No struggle, no impact craters, no blood. They were taken. More likely, turned. They moved cautiously through the remains. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the hum of their scanners and the distant crackle of broken wiring. Then they heard it. Laughter, software, childlike, echoing through a twisted corridor. Elliot drew a flashlight. That's not ominous at all. They followed the sound to a chamber deep beneath the outpost, a place untouched by the fire above. The walls pulsed faintly with bioorganic material. A figure stood in the center, back turned to them, bathed in dim blue light. Captain Dresk, Tira called out. The figure turned. It had Dresk's face, but not his eyes. Too late, it whispered. The door is open. The Guardian is here, but he's already too late. Then the form dissolved, scattering like dust in the wind. Elliot stepped forward. That wasn't a projection. That was a message. Tira drew her blade. They know you. I was afraid of that. What do we do now? Elliot looked up at the ceiling, at the tangled mesh of neural wiring and pulsing lights. We leave, he said, and we prepare. For what? For whatever's about to come through that door. The debriefing chamber smelled faintly of disinfectant and scorched silicon, which Elliot had come to associate with either a successful mission or a really disappointing snack. Tira stood at the far end of the room, arms folded, her long ears angled downward in a way that could only mean she was thinking very, very hard, or extremely annoyed. Possibly both. Elliot leaned back in his chair and spun slowly, the way humans did when pretending not to be overwhelmed. So, he said after a long silence, we agree that wasn't really Dresk. It was him, Tira said, voice clipped. Or what used to be. Technically correct, which is the most depressing kind of correct. He stopped spinning and tapped his fingers on the tabletop. What we saw was a construct, probably memory-based, which means the Drencore are now mimicking individuals with near-perfect recall. She didn't answer. He leaned forward. That's not basic infiltration. That's cognitive synthesis. That takes serious processing power and time. They've never used tactics like this. They've never needed to. But now they're studying us. You, me, this base, maybe even the cafeteria menu, which, by the way, could use some rethinking. Her gaze narrowed. You're deflecting. Yes, and still making more progress than your high command. He stood. We're not facing a standard Drencore hive. This is a new strain, possibly an offshoot, maybe even a rogue cell, she finished. Elliot gave her a small impressed nod. See? You're learning to think like a paranoid Terran. Before Tira could respond, the console chirped. A priority alert flickered across the screen. Incoming vessel. Designation unknown. Trajectory. Base vector. Tira tapped the control. Do we have visual? A moment later, the feed came alive. The ship was sleek, dark, and utterly alien. Nothing like Drencore biotech. Nothing like Narellian warcraft. It moved with deliberate slowness, as if gliding on threads of gravity itself. Elliot tilted his head. Well, that's new. No identifiers, no transmissions. Looks expensive. It's uninvited. Same could be said of me. They moved to the observation deck where the vessel hung in low orbit, unmoving. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Then the ship released a pulse, soundless, invisible, but felt like a pressure behind the eyes. Elliot blinked. "They're scanning us." Tira winced. "No, they're listening." Before she could elaborate, the lights dimmed. A new signal cut through the system. An audio file, garbled at first, then refining into a voice that sounded like it had been dragged across centuries. "Guardian designate identified. Memory access authorized. Initiating interface." Tira stared at Elliot. "What did you do?" He raised a finger. "Technically, nothing." The floor beneath them shimmered. Reality twisted just slightly, like a ripple on a pond. They weren't transported, but the room was altered. The very air refracted, now showing a layered projection of Elliot's past. War zones, ruined cities, a Terran flag burning under a fractured sky. Tira stepped back, momentarily overwhelmed. Elliot sighed. "Really wish they'd skipped the nostalgia reel." The vision stabilized into a sterile chamber from another time. A voice echoed again. "Subject, Elliot Dyson. Function, observational guardian. Status, voluntary withdrawal. Mission archive compromised." Tira turned to him slowly. "You were one of them." He didn't answer. "You were Terran oversight. Guardian class." Elliot nodded once. "Long time ago. I left after the program fell apart." "Why?" "Because they stopped asking why." The projection ended. The ship outside powered down its pulse. The alert faded. Elliot looked tired. "That wasn't a threat. That was a memory anchor. Some old system still tracking me, still trying to finish a protocol that no longer exists." "You're not just a strategist," Tira said. "You were engineered for planetary defense." "Engineered might be too strong a word. More like trained until I broke." Before she could reply, another alert buzzed through the comms. This time it was clear. "Perimeter breach, Sector 12. Incoming hostiles." Tira snapped into motion. "Let's move." As they reached the defense platform, soldiers were already in position. The air shimmered with heat, dust swirling beneath the storm-lit sky. Drencorps figures began to emerge from the eastern ridge. Only they didn't move like normal hives. These were calm, coordinated. They advanced without sound, without rage. Elliot scanned them through his field lens. "That's wrong," he muttered. "That formation, that's not hive behavior." Tira stepped beside him. "What is it?" He adjusted the settings. "That's training. They're mimicking our tactics." The enemy struck. What followed was not a battle. It was a chess match disguised as a firefight. Every Norellian move was countered. Every fallback maneuver was anticipated. Elliot coordinated units from a high platform, barking orders that made no tactical sense until they worked. "Move Alpha Team to the left flank. Now!" "Right. Now pull Beta Squad backwards. Trust me, it's going to look stupid until it works." Tira, in the thick of it, slashed through enemies while issuing commands with crisp precision. But even as they pushed the enemy back, she realized the truth. "They're not here to win," she said through the comms. Elliot's voice came sharp. "They're here to test us." And just like that, the Drencorps forces retreated. Clean, surgical, no bodies left behind, no wounded, just silence. As the smoke cleared, Elliot stood at the edge of the battlefield, scanning the horizon. "We just failed a quiz," he muttered. Tira joined him. "They're learning from us." "No," Elliot said. "They've already learned. Now they're teaching themselves." She stared at him, her expression unreadable. "Then what do we do?" Elliot dropped into a crouch, drawing a quick pattern into the dirt. It was a symbol, old Terran code, a warning. "We stop reacting," he said. "And," he stood brushing his hands clean, "we make them react to us." The sky above Norel 7 cracked in half. It wasn't a metaphor this time. A visible fissure opened across the stratosphere as the Drencorps fleet tore through subspace and arrived in formation, warships emerging like black fangs from a wound in the heavens. Energy signatures spiked across every channel. Command towers scrambled. Someone dropped their lunch tray in the mess hall, and no one even blinked. Elliot stood in the central command nexus, coat slightly wrinkled, hair defiantly messy. He stared at the holographic map, watching red pulses stack across the screen like falling dominoes. "Well," he said, sipping tea, "they brought the whole family." Tira was already issuing orders. Her voice cut through the chaos like a vibroblade. "Evacuate all non-combat personnel. Deploy orbital defenses. Lock targeting on the central hive vessel." Elliot raised a hand. "Cancel that last part." She turned. "Excuse me?" "They want us to target the hive. It's bait. Hit it, and we trigger a feedback loop. They collapse it, warp space destabilizes, and we all get turned into philosophical vapor." Tyra blinked once. "Philosophical vapor?" "Yeah, like smoke with opinions." She sighed. "So what do we target?" Elliot smiled. "Their signal lattice." He brought up a hidden feed, lines of code overlaid on the tactical display. The Drencore fleet was broadcasting a psychic relay network, forming a web of control that synced every drone and ship into one unified mind. "Think of it like a group chat," Elliot explained, "only with more screaming and no mute button." Tira leaned in. "If we break the connection, we confuse them, sever the hive's control long enough to slip a surprise into their collective pants." "Do they wear pants?" "Let's not think about that." As alarms blared across the base, Elliot moved fast, fingers flying over command panels, rerouting power, bypassing failsafes. He ignored the protocol warnings, the blinking red messages, and the AI voice telling him he lacked clearance. "Override code," he muttered. "Elliot Dyson Alpha 1, don't touch my stuff." The system hesitated, then obeyed. Tira watched as he deployed the mapper again, now augmented with three strange modules, one from a salvaged enemy shard, one from his personal archive, and one that looked suspiciously like a kitchen timer. "Are you sure this will work?" she asked. "Absolutely not. But if it does work, I'll be insufferable for weeks." He tapped the device. It pulsed. At first, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the enemy ships began to shift formation, disoriented, unsynced. The clean lines of their assault pattern fell apart. On the surface, Drencore drones stopped mid-advance. Some fell. Some turned in place, unsure of their function. "Now," Elliot said, "hit the relay ships." Not the hive. The long ones with the spinning death halos. Tira relayed the command. Artillery roared from the planetary batteries. The sky lit up in white-hot arcs as the relay ships shattered one by one, fragmenting into pieces that disintegrated before hitting ground. In the absence of guidance, the hive mind fractured, and with it, the invasion collapsed. The Drencore didn't flee. They simply froze. Some tried to reboot themselves, sparking and twitching. Others folded down into quiet, lifeless poses, like statues waiting for meaning. Elliot slumped into a chair. Somewhere out there, a very angry psychic fungus just lost its Wi-Fi. Tira exhaled slowly. "It's over?" He glanced at the mapper's final readout. "Here, yeah, for now." The following days were quieter than expected. Crews cleared debris, and the planet's surface, while still scorched and battered, held a strange peace. Soldiers who once feared the next hour now dared to make plans for the next day. In the auxiliary wing, Elliot packed his duffel. "You're leaving," Tira said from the doorway. He looked up. "Thought I'd try another planet that doesn't explode on arrival? Maybe one with beaches." "You could stay. The High Council wants to offer you a formal position." Elliot gave a small smile. "The last time I took a formal position, it came with expectations and a very itchy uniform." She stepped closer. "You changed how they see us. You changed how I see things." "Well, I am a terrible influence." She tilted her head. "Will I ever see you again?" Elliot considered. "Do you want to?" "I wouldn't ask if I didn't." He dug into his coat and handed her a small flat disc. It shimmered faintly. "Tether beacon. Use it once. I'll find you. Unless I'm dead. Then please delete my browser history." She took it carefully, expression unreadable. "You're a strange man, Elliot Dyson." "I get that a lot." They stood there for a long moment. Then, without a word, she extended her hand. He took it. Outside, the stars were beginning to realign, new ships arriving for peacekeeping and cleanup. The sky, though still cracked, seemed just a little lighter. Elliot stepped onto the departing shuttle. As it rose from the surface, Tira watched until it vanished into the clouds. In the silence that followed, she looked down at the beacon, and faintly she smiled. Far above in the ship's cabin, Elliot leaned back in his seat, hat tilted over his eyes. "Next stop," he murmured, "someplace quiet." The stars for once didn't argue.